By the mid-1980s, the zombie movie, much like the slasher, had evolved into a solidified, familiar and recognisable format. Fans knew when going to see a zombie movie exactly what they would be in for. A fun, raucous, blood-drenched ride about the end of civilization and a bunch of survivors banded together, facing off against flesh-eating monsters. However, some horror filmmakers and horror writers were still interested in some of the more spiritual and existential concepts which made zombie movies so popular back in the 1930s. In fact, in the late 80s, 2 films, both based on books, used the trope of the zombie to explore the subject of grief, death, and the existence of the soul. And both movies considered the bleak notion that if reanimated corpses in some way did exist, then actually, sometimes dead is better. Join me as we continue exploring the evolution of the zombie movie, and we discuss Wes Craven's The Serpent and the Rainbow, and Stephen King and Mary Lambert's Pet Sematary. Welcome back to the evolution of horror. My name is Mike, and as ever, I am your host. If you're tuning in for the first time, then welcome. In this podcast, we explore and dissect the evolution of the horror genre by looking at particular subgenres across seasons of weeks. Now, we are currently in the middle of exploring the evolution of the zombie movie, and this is part 11. In fact, I think this marks the halfway point through our journey, so we've come a long way, but we've still got a long way to go. In which, as the intro suggested, we are going to be looking in spoilerific detail at 2 movies, perhaps maybe slightly underappreciated zombie movies from the late 1980s, The Serpent and the Rainbow from 1988 and Mary Lambert's Pet Sematary from 1989. Both of these reviews will be spoiler-filled reviews. Now, I know that also this week marks the release of the brand new Pet Sematary from 2019. I have seen that, and there will be a review of that in full on the Patreon page this week, but just so you know, just to reassure everyone, there will be no spoilers whatsoever of the new 2019 version of Pet Sematary. We will only be talking about the 1980s one in this week's episode. So, absolutely loads to cover, as you can imagine, so let's get stuck straight in. We're going to start with a discussion of The Serpent and the Rainbow, and joining me to discuss Wes Craven's brilliant movie is a guest I've had on the podcast a couple of times before. She was last here discussing The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina back in October. She now produces and co-hosts a brand new podcast called Don't Point That Horror at Me, and I'm thrilled to have her back. It is my great pleasure to welcome to the podcast Becky Darke. Hello.
Hi, Mike.
Hi.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm all right, thank you.
We're doing all right. We went out last night and it was quite a late one, so if we sound a little bit croaky, that'll be why.
4:30. I was in an Uber on the way home after dancing at Heaven for hours on end.
So good. I mean, we went out with other people in the Facebook group and everything, and what's so funny, we were talking about this earlier, is like these are all like proper horror film fanatics who are all the nicest, softest bunch of people, and we all danced to like Britney Spears and Backstreet Boys for half the night.
Anybody sort of outside looking in would never have imagined that we then, go home and watch the goriest, bloodiest, most nihilistic stuff, just like throwing shapes to Backstreet Boys.
So
and,
good.
Yeah, it was so much fun. What a crew.
What a treat. First of all, I want to ask you about your podcast. Congratulations on a fantastic podcast.
Well, thank you very much.
Tell us a bit about it.
So my friend Jill Nolan and I have started a podcast about the old point horror books. So
I'm sure everyone out there probably remembers these from the 90s.
I hope so. It's weird. I kind of get a mixed response from people when I tell them what my podcast's about. They either immediately like jaw-dropping, hands in the air, how exciting, or they just look at me very blankly like, what are you talking about?
What?
But yeah, so point horror books, the kind of when I was reading them back in the 90s when I was a teenager, I don't think the phrase young adult books or YA was really a thing, but that's essentially what they are.
Totally, They're kind of,
because I suppose Goosebumps is a bit more well known now, but they're kind of Goosebumps but older, right? More YA-ish than more teenagery than Goosebumps.
That's right. I think Goosebumps are aimed at a slightly younger audience. But yeah, they've all got, titles like The Cheerleader and Freeze Tag and Teacher's Pet. And R.L. Stine wrote a lot of them. Classic. It's kind of an umbrella term for these horror fiction books by then a selection of different authors, but anyway, Jill and I take a very irreverent look at these books, and we kind of look at it through the kind of nostalgic lens of looking back at the 90s and our misspent youth.
It's so good,
listening
so
to
much fun.
Right Said Fred and
I know
reading.
There is some serious 90s nostalgia in this podcast. It's so good.
Fun.
So good.
So yeah, we've got 3 episodes out already. It's a monthly thing, and we started in January, so there's 3 out now.
Brilliant. And you can find that in all the places where people find podcasts.
All the usual places.
Yeah. Amazing. Very exciting. So we're here to talk about zombies this time round, and this is quite an interesting one because this is a bit different to most other zombie movies. But
it is.
But generally speaking, kind of the classic zombie type movies, are you a fan of them? Are you a fan of this subgenre?
I like some zombie movies. I wouldn't say I'm a fan of zombie movies. And I knew you were going to ask me this, and so I've been kind of giving it more thought than I maybe would have before. And if a new film comes out and it's a ghost story or like a witch story, I will I'll seek it out. So, I'll be like, oh, amazing, like a new ghost film or a new witch film. If a new film comes out and it's a zombie film, I'm not going to automatically go and see it just because it's zombie films. Having said that, being a horror fan, there are some absolute classics that are zombie films. And, there's such a wide range as well. So it's a bit difficult to kind of say I'm not a fan of zombie films because there's a zombie film and there's a zombie film.
Yeah, there are so many as well.
I like them, but they wouldn't be my favourite.
Yeah, I think that's a good, interesting thing. I would be exactly the same. Like if one comes out, maybe because there are so many and there are quite a lot of bad ones, I kind of wait to hear whether it's worth watching before I run to go and see it. I suppose that's the difference. But there are some really good I guess it's more folky zombie films like Pet Sematary this year coming out, which I'm very excited about, like that kind of stuff. I do like, and that's kind of like a twist on zombie, but I guess you're right, it has more of that kind of folk side, which maybe is what is more intriguing to me.
So if it's like the zombie subgenre, but then it's like mixed in with maybe another
something
one
else. Yeah.
And I think I was thinking about it, and I think one of the reasons I'm not a huge fan of a lot of zombie films, there are a lot of them, is I quite like to be able to empathise with the monster as well. So if it's like a serial killer film or something, and I don't mean like you're always kind of on their side or whatever, but it's good to have like an interesting antagonist who you can kind of understand their motivations and stuff. And a lot of zombies in zombie films don't have much of a kind of character or backstory or anything that you can kind of really sink your teeth into motivation wise. But if I think about a couple of zombie films more recently that I've really got a kick out of, so like Maggie I loved, and The Girl with All the Gifts, those are zombie films that you actually and you do like get to see that kind of a bit more their sort of their personality, or like the reasons behind why they are the way they are, etc. And so that, I think that's when I find them most affecting.
Cool. Well, let's talk about, so we're going to talk about The Serpent and the Rainbow, which is quite an interesting throwback, it feels like, to kind of old zombies, because again with zombies, like you said, there's kind of, it feels like there's sort of subgenres within zombie movies. There's like infection movies and whatever, traditional kind of Romero zombies, and this is feels like the first sort of voodoo zombie film that we've had in however many decades, it seems like.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I was looking at the other zombie films that were released around. So this was 88.
Yeah.
And, the other ones that were released around like a similar time, sort of within like 2 or 3 years, were like Evil Dead 2.
Yeah. Like Return of the
Living Dead and Return of the Living Dead Part 2. And, again, those were all much more kind of follow on from the classic sort of Romero zombie. And then, this kind of really harks back to the Caribbean school, so much back to the kind of old Haitian style zombies that we saw in films like White Zombie and I Walk with a Zombie. So.
From Wes Craven, director of A Nightmare on Elm Street, comes a story of the forbidden world between life and death.
There's a door to the mystical, and you just walk through it.
Somebody brought him back from the grave, and I want to know how they did it.
Death is not the end. I'll take your soul.
You think you can take these people's secrets and just walk away?
In the shadows of the imagination lies the ultimate nightmare.
Don't let them bury me. I'm not dead.
The Serpent and the Rainbow.
Okay, so Dr. Dennis Allen is played by Bill Pullman, and he is an ethnobotanist. So he's interested in like plants and what they can do. He kind of goes over to the Amazon, and we see him over there, and he's working with shamans to get to the bottom of what different plants can do. And he goes on a little hallucinatory trip, finds his spirit animal, and then he's called by an old friend who is a consultant for a pharma company because they've heard that there's been an instance of zombification in Haiti. So a guy who was declared dead and was buried has like 15 years later shown up in his old community, and everybody thought he was dead, and here he is back to life essentially. And they want Dr. Allen to go to Haiti and investigate how this has happened. And they think that it must have been done by some kind of drug, and they want to essentially find the kind of concoction and then bring it back to the States and make it into like an anesthetic for kind of the medical
use
world.
It for science.
Yeah, exactly. And they're talking about saving thousands of deaths in America alone. So that's essentially it. He goes to Haiti,
and investigates.
He's looking for this zombie powder. Hooks up with a psychiatrist on the ground over there, who was kind of treating other people who have come back from the dead, and she's his sort of woman on the ground, and he also bumps into various other kind of nefarious characters, including the head of the secret police, who also happens to be like a voodoo priest, and is getting up to some nasty shit.
Yeah, don't fuck with that guy. Oh my god. Yes, exactly. So what was this the first time you'd seen this for the podcast, or had you seen it before?
No, I'd seen it before. I had seen it before.
What do you think? Do you like it?
I do like it. Yeah, it's a funny film to put in a box in some ways.
It really is. I think like I was saying before we recorded that I saw this. I like it too, but I like it now a lot more than I did when I first saw it. I first watched it, and I think I just thought, which I'm sure probably a lot of people thought when it came out, it's like we've had all these fun zombie movies like Return of the Living Dead, and now it's like, oh, where's Craven, who made A Nightmare on Elm Street, he's done a zombie movie. Yeah. And it's like, oh, this isn't what I was expecting from a zombie movie or a Where's Craven movie, because it's not traditional horror in a lot of senses, is it? And it is... it's got much more going on. I think it feels like it's got more to say than just being a scary movie.
Yeah, and it tells just quite a straightforward story. Yeah. It's this guy who is investigating this thing, and you just kind of follow the plot along, with, you know, various instances of horror stuff that happen. But, you know, you think about... you know, we talk a lot about how zombie films are often used as kind of allegories for, you know, other kind of social issues. This, you know, there's none of that here. There's no sort of subtext. There's no. It's kind of you know, being used to talk about you know, the AIDS epidemic, or like a war, or, you know, global warming, or anything like that. And it's just, you know, it's just quite a straightforward story.
It is what it is. I suppose it kind of has some political and social stuff, but it's text, I suppose, rather than subtext, because it is all in the story kind of thing. There is it does feel like there's a bit of that kind of colonialism and America kind of coming into this other place and kind of, you know,
definitely
disregarding it a little bit and that kind of thing.
But it doesn't. It's not doing that thing where it's got the zombies, but they're kind of like, if you look at it a different way,
yes, exactly,
they could be something
else.
Yeah,
the zombies are just zombies. So a lot of people might have heard of this story because it is based on a true story, and we talked about this at the beginning of the zombie series. This, you know, what happened to Wade Davis and him investigating this powder, which apparently is maybe real. There is this chemical, this toxic thing that comes from pufferfish, which like makes you dead for a few hours, and then you wake up again. It's terrifying, and then when you wake up, you're like a zombie. So that's a real thing, apparently. Well, I don't think it's ever been proven, has it?
Well, so
go on. You've done more research into this than me.
There is. I'm gonna do a little kind of credit here. There is an episode of the podcast, This Podcast Will Kill You, basically about this. So about the tetrodotoxin.
Yes, that's what it is.
And it's kind of the truth behind whether it can or can't induce this state of death.
Yes.
And essentially, it comes from pufferfish. It comes from a lot of different animals. But pufferfish tends to be, I don't know, like quite an accessible.
You can't move for pufferfish.
Right? And so essentially it attacks your nerves and your muscles, and there's it basically stops your nerves being able to talk to your muscles.
Right.
So if you want to like lift your arm or speak, the like connection between your nerves and the muscles is attacked by this tetrodotoxin. So if you inhale it, so it needs to go in like through a mucous membrane, so like eyes or mouth or like up your nose or something like that. If you inhale it, or if you like take it intravenously, it essentially paralyzes you because your muscles aren't working properly. And the reason it can cause death is because if that then affects like your breathing muscles, so like your diaphragm or something like that, you essentially suffocate because you can't breathe. But what it also does is, if it doesn't kill you, it takes you to this kind of edge of death state. So your breathing goes like really, really shallow, so it can hardly be detected. Like you're just about taking in enough oxygen to keep you alive, but it's undetectable. Your heartbeat slows right down, so that if somebody sort of feels your pulse on your wrist, like they wouldn't be able to feel it. And I guess nowadays that we've got, you know, ECG machines and all of that kind of thing, and like brain activity machines, it is probably less likely that you would say that somebody is dead if they're not dead.
Just written off. And
exactly. But, you know, back in the day, before we had all those machines, you know, if somebody wasn't breathing, you know, you couldn't see or feel somebody breathing, or you couldn't feel their pulse, like they're dead. But the thing is with this tetrodotoxin is if it wears off, so basically if you don't die, if it then wears off, you come back and there's like no lasting effects. So there's no like neurological damage or anything like that. So you know, you essentially come back to life. It's very easy to see why somebody would have thought that like somebody was dead, and then the effects of this toxin wear off and they actually come back to life.
It's really interesting. And then it's really interesting that that's used as a kind of like voodoo folklore warning to like, this is what could happen to you. There's lots of things in the film about, you know, you come back but is your soul gone and all of this kind of thing, and and it became like this kind of warning or something almost, you know, this fear in these villages apparently. And yeah, so it's interesting the way that it's like rooted in folklore and also science, which kind of is the zombie genre. It's like both of those things, isn't it?
100%.
All the way through, you either get the kind of medical zombie or you get this kind of this supernatural, there's no more room in hell type of zombie as well. So yeah, it's interesting that it's like all there in that backstory, which is what created the zombie as a thing, really.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think it's absolutely fascinating that you know, we're used to people being scared of zombies, like you run away from zombies because they want to eat your brains or whatever, but you know, with this, with kind of the Haitian zombie, and in that community, people are more scared of being zombified. So they're more scared of being a zombie than they are of the zombies themselves.
Yes, the zombies aren't the threat at all. It's
used as like almost like a warning.
And apparently, like Kevin Lyons was saying to me in the first episode of this podcast, that it was also you know, like used as a way to scare slaves even, and into like, you know, obeying, and this idea that you could still be used as a slave even after death. Even death can't get you out of this world, you know. We will carry on using your reanimated dead body and make it work, kind of thing.
Isn't that just the most terrifying thing?
And I guess that is like what White Zombie is, isn't it? Bela Lugosi kind of using all these zombies as his slaves. So it's kind of, but it's interesting. Again, like mid-80s, we hadn't seen a zombie film like this in decades.
That's
so it's really interesting throwback.
And it goes back to that that idea of zombies being controlled by somebody external. So I think, you know, Romero comes along with Night of the Living Dead, and they are these kind of autonomous creatures.
Yes.
You know, there's nobody, they've been created by, I think it's like radiation, it turns out.
Yeah.
You know, and they are their own entities, you know, out doing what zombies do.
Yes.
Whereas, back in the old days of, you know, Bela Lugosi, he is creating these people to have control over them, and he does like that funny like little grip with his hands, and like that's how he does the magic. And this does exactly the same thing. You know, you've got the Bokor, like the kind of priest guy, the bad guy, who can essentially, you know, control these people who have been like zombie, that, you know, that he's kind of zombified.
So it's like, it's one of those films, and I think this is a very Wes Craven thing, I think, isn't it? Like he obviously he makes scary movies, but I think he's more interested in like the real life fear behind them a lot of the time. And he's really interested in, like, all of his movies, you know, Nightmare on Elm Street was more about sleep paralysis or about, you know, whatever, like true stories of, you know, things happening and blah blah blah. And a lot of his movies cover those kind of real life issues or real life fears, you know, and you can tell that's what he was more interested in with zombies than just like Romero style Living Dead coming after you to eat your brains kind of thing.
That fear of oh my god, can you imagine being buried alive? I mean, is there anything
it's the ultimate worst fear, isn't it?
Like that idea of like that locked in syndrome thing, where, you know, you get it a few times in the film, where you know, they're aware, but they can't move, they can't speak, they can hear, you know, these people like pronouncing them dead, and then you know, being buried alive. I mean, that is the stuff of nightmares.
It really is. Yeah, that's the thing. So it's interesting as like a, you know, scary movie. It's not like particularly scary in the kind of traditional horror sense, but I think the ideas behind it are terrifying. That's the thing. So it's kind of interesting. So let's. I want to ask you about Wes Craven as well. We've got to talk about Wes Craven because I love Wes Craven. But again, like, it feels like this movie was made in a kind of weird period in Wes Craven's career, because obviously he had previously done A Nightmare on Elm Street and he hadn't yet done Scream sort of 10 years later, and this was kind of in that period in the middle, right, where he did a lot of really interesting movies, but they were slightly more underappreciated. So as well as Serpent and the Rainbow, obviously movies like Shocker, The People Under the Stairs, New Nightmare, I think movies that are
very much lauded by horror fans and appreciated now, but maybe at the time were not quite what Wes Craven fans were after or something. They didn't seem to resonate as well as some of his other biggies. But first of all, I just want to ask you, sort of generally, are you a fan of Wes Craven and his work, and what do you think of this kind of middle period of his career?
I am, yeah. I mean, there are people who aren't fans of Wes Craven's work. I mean,
I know.
I hope not.
I hope not.
He's a legend in our world.
Yes.
I'm a big fan of Nightmare on Elm Street. I love Scream because it's one of the best horror films that's ever been made.
Yes.
But the stuff in the middle, I think, it's got a lot of merit. It might not be the stuff that necessarily springs to mind when somebody says Wes Craven. It's not one of those like big hitters, but
totally, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so Shocker is, I just love it so much. Shocker is one of the films that when I used to, after my parents had divorced and I used to go around to Dad's house on a Friday night.
Yeah.
We used to watch quite a lot of horror films, actually. I think I spoke about this when I was on before. But Shocker was one of the VHS tapes.
Yeah.
And it was, I remember so vividly, it was in like one of those like oversized VHS cases. And then the slip with the cover art and stuff was like too small for the box.
Right.
It was definitely nicked from the video shop. Like 100%.
That's a video rental box.
Just didn't go back.
Amazing. That sounds like a legend.
Dad got it. I mean, Dad worked in a pub, so he might have got it like off a bloke in the pub.
Yeah, totally.
But, I mean, that was an absolute go-to classic on a Friday night. And one of the other ones in, the similar batch was Return of the Living Dead Part 2.
Yes.
And I saw Return of the Living Dead Part 2, a bunch of times when I was a kid. Saw it way before I saw Return of the Living Dead.
Right, yeah. Because that was the VHS. Yeah.
Didn't matter at all.
No, of course not. Of course not.
These are very happy memories of mine.
Yes.
But I just think Shocker is I just think it's a brilliant film.
And it was so it was so hated by so many people. And I think, he thought this was going to be like his next big thing, like after Nightmare on Elm Street, his next big monster, his next big, potential franchise. And it just bombed. But
I think, I don't know, do you think maybe it wasn't different enough? Like it was,
maybe.
Freddie, is in your dreams.
Yes.
And Horace Pinker, played by the wonderful Mitch Pileggi. Skinner from The X-Files.
Yes.
He's in the electricity, so he's in, he comes through the TV and stuff like that. And I just think maybe it wasn't different enough.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
But I mean, I saw that long before I saw Nightmare on Elm Street.
Interesting.
So that was probably the first Wes Craven film I saw.
I love it. And I still think, the worst of Wes Craven films, they still have so much interesting about them. I love The People Under the Stairs.
Oh, what a movie.
It is one of my faves and so underrated. I just think it's brilliant. And again, it's filled with loads of interesting like social commentary and stuff, but it's also really fucking funny and scary.
Yeah.
I love it. It's like Home Alone on crack or something. It's amazing.
So good.
It's so good.
It looks so good. Like the design in like the production design in that film, like the house, all of those, like it's one of those films a little bit like The Shining. You know how people have, like nerds have kind of drawn out the blueprints of the house, and it turns out that like it couldn't possibly exist with like where all the rooms are in relation to each other. This feels like the same thing to me. Like that house is insanely big, like the walls and the secret passages, but it's brilliant because it feels like a kid's fairy tale nightmare. It's like Hansel and Gretel or something, isn't it? But it's just wonderful, and I loved it so much as a kid because it's about a kid and it's like it's got that kind of fun, almost like adventure film element to it. Yeah, but also it's really fucking disturbing. There's a lot of like child abuse and really, I mean, those two villains, that couple, are just absolutely terrifying, hideous. Yeah, like brother and sister call each other mummy and daddy. So creepy. He walks around in like the gimp suit. Oh my god. It's
dogs.
just,
it's really weird.
It's really, really weird, but so good.
So good.
And so there's the documentary Horror Noir.
Yes,
That right?
I haven't had a chance to see that yet. Yeah, Horror Noir. It's on Shudder, isn't it?
On Shudder.
Yes.
It's well worth a watch, honestly.
Can't wait to watch
it's
it. Yeah.
really, really good. And I know that it's been, lauded all over the internet, so I'm not telling anybody anything new. But in that, what they talk about the people under the stairs and how it was, amazing to kind of black horror fans to watch this kid who is, the lead in this movie, like this black kid. I think Jordan Peele talks about it, just to turn it on and brilliant. To be like, holy shit, like that I can see myself on the screen for like one of the first times. It's an amazing bit of casting. Fool is such an amazing character, and he's so well played.
He absolutely carries it as like the hero of this film. This little like 11-year-old kid or whatever he is. Yeah, it's amazing.
But they talk about how I can't remember the name of the academic or the writer who says it now, but she features very prominently in the documentary, and all of the people who feature are kind of linked to horror in some way. So they're either academics or they're writers or they're actors or directors. And she talks about how Wes Craven is actually one of the more inclusive horror directors. He in Serpent and the Rainbow, which is obviously set in Haiti, and so there's a huge black cast for that reason. It was filmed on location in Haiti and the Dominican Republic. And even though it does slightly tread the line of, voodoo being used as a horror, like a horrifying trope. And I think she says something about there's this assumption that like all black people know voodoo. But it actually does very positively portray the religion and the spiritual kind of life of voodoo, because they say like kind of overtly at one point the bad guy in it. He says, he isn't Haiti. He's this like rabid dog or something. And otherwise, you get like this really positive, through the psychiatrist, this really positive look on, this kind of community that's built up around the religion and the kind of spiritualism of it. And so, they spoke in the documentary. They spoke really kind of favourably about Wes Craven as an inclusive director for, people of colour.
What a legend Wes Craven is. What a legend. And that's interesting. And I was gonna ask you about that anyway. So we kind of covered it now. But I do think that's interesting because in some ways they are obviously, apart from the real kind of villainous characters, a lot of these Haitian characters are in some ways more sympathetic and likable than a lot of the American white bureaucrats that send him over.
Like that dinner party bit is just
it's amazing because they go proper over the top with like awful rich white middle class types, don't
really
they?
do.
So again, it does really feel like it's hammering that message in a little bit, but it's great. So let's talk about Bill Pullman, obviously our star. You're a Bill Pullman fan.
I mean, you could say that, yeah. Big fan.
He's very handsome in this movie, right?
He's so handsome. His hair in this movie
is phenomenal.
It's almost got a life of its own.
It's like a Timotei commercial. It's amazing. It's the most bouncy. It's got volume. He's
like an action star. He's jumping off of balconies. Yeah. He's like brawling with the secret police. There's quite a sexy sex scene in the cave. He is, I mean, he's just perfect. I think he's so great.
It's brilliant. His character, so he's not technically playing Wade Davis, is he? He's playing Alan somebody. Is
Dennis
that right?
Allen.
Dennis Allen.
Yeah. So I mean, even though it's based on the real life account of Wade Davis going over to Haiti and looking for the zombie powder, I don't know that much of the kind of like supernatural people sort of flying at each other and like jaguar kind of spirit animals. You know, I think maybe some of that might have
artistic
been
license, maybe
exactly,
a little
layered
bit
on top.
Yes,
perhaps.
exactly. But it's very confusing because it's based on a book that is written by Wade Davis called The Serpent and the Rainbow, right? About his experiences.
Exactly.
And that is essentially, I've not read it, but it's essentially like a first-person account, right?
Yes.
But it's
really well written. It is so worth the read.
And I've heard, and I remember you telling me it's like very much, it's not like a kind of boring, you know, science book bogged down
Not
in
at all.
all the
it's quite
facts.
swashbuckly.
Yeah, quite narrow. It's a proper narrative kind of thing. So
Yeah, he's a really beautiful writer,
interesting.
actually.
But none of those elements, I take it, then were in.
So
Is it quite different? To the
I
book?
haven't finished the book.
Oh,
yet,
okay,
about
interesting. So you
halfway
haven't
through.
got to that.
I mean, maybe.
But you probably won't be coming across sort of jaguars and.
Doubt it. I doubt it.
Yeah.
I'm not getting the sense from the first half of the book that is
This
imminent.
ethnobotanist is going to write about. Yeah, amazing. But yeah, so as this, do you like him in the film, his character? Because again, I think there is that element of slight arrogance when he comes onto this island as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, he's super arrogant.
Yeah.
I think he plays it. I think he plays the arrogance well.
He does it. It's a really good balance, isn't it? Yeah,
it does. Like, he's not unlikable by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah.
Not, I don't think so.
No.
But there's a couple of bits where he definitely pushes it to
Yes.
us. His interactions with the locals.
Yes, and Bill Pullman is quite good at doing kind of smug.
Oh, yeah.
He's very good at doing smug. That like kind of half smile that he does, that his face kind of mainly does. But yeah, the moments when he like goes and he steals the poison from the bar and he downs it, and it's like, you know, I think there is that element. He is obviously our hero in it, but I think there is also that element that like he is also a bit of a twat, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, he's essentially just shown up to this community. And yeah, fine. I mean, there's some bad shit going down, and you know, he manages to vanquish the evil. Good old white American coming in and sorting that out.
Exactly.
But yeah, I think absolutely. You know, you're sort of supposed to see it as this community that sort of thrives and you know, is very singular and you know, really quite unique in the world in terms of the way that they live their lives and their relationship with their religion and everything, and all of the, you know, the potions and the ritual and all of that stuff. And he just comes along like, essentially, I know it's all done under the guise of wanting to save lives, but essentially he's there for like Big Pharma.
Totally. And even that, I don't really believe, you know, like, again, those horrible suits and bureaucrats going, this could be, you know, really important and could save lives. It's like, no, you just all want to get rich from it, basically.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know?
And in that like conference meeting at the beginning, he says something like, oh, you know, we could save 50,000 lives in America alone a year, and imagine what we could do across the world if it's marketed properly. It's like, oh, you're such a dick.
Exactly. So it's good. It's again like a really subtle, interesting balance of the way those characters are written.
No, it is very well written, actually.
So how do you think it works? We've talked about it briefly about, like, you know, it being a horror movie. Like, does any of it kind of frighten you in that sort of classic horror way, would you say? Because there are a few like quite nasty scenes and there are a few creepy scenes.
The torture scene.
Oh my God, yeah.
I mean, you'll probably wince more.
Yes, I'm crossing my legs right now.
Yeah. When he's like, it's fine, it just went through the scrotum. Like,
so he gets nailed,
fucking badass,
a massive nail hammered into his scrotum. Yeah, and yeah, I love it. He's like, no, it just went through the skin. It didn't hit anything else. I'm fine. It's like, holy shit.
Bill Pullman, man.
Bill Pullman.
What a hero.
But yeah, those are some nasty scenes.
That scene is really brutal.
Yeah.
And then when he gets like dumped on the street afterwards, and he's just like in like a pair of like bloody Y fronts, just kind of cradling himself. Like, I mean, that's quite full on.
Yeah.
There's a couple of quite effective, like more kind of traditional horror scares, I suppose. Like there's quite Wes Craven appropriate, you know, is they use kind of dreams and premonition quite a lot. And so there's one bit where he has a dream about like zombie bride, and then
creepy.
he like pulls her veil back, and her mouth kind of all stretches and extends, and then like a massive snake bursts out of her mouth, and
Brilliant.
yeah, I mean that's pretty effective.
Pretty cool. Yeah, the noises that she makes are really creepy. Yeah, it's brilliant. Yeah, I enjoyed it. There is a lot of dream sequences or like tripping out sequences, isn't there? There is a lot of that. And I guess it's like, is this movie kind of overtly supernatural, or is there any ambiguity to it? I.e., like the idea that maybe it is psychological or it's drug effects as opposed to these are actually magical things or people or whatever. I think it goes pretty definitively supernatural towards the end, doesn't it?
I kind of thought it did, but then essentially when he has like the big boss fight with with the like voodoo priest, that's when he kind of like flies through the air, and you see like the big jaguar cat spirit animal thing, and he sort of smashes all the jars with the souls in, and the priest like bursts into flames, and you kind of think, oh well, how did that happen? And, but at the end of it, when he's like the priest's all burnt, and Bill Pullman's like tying him up, like it looks like he's doing it with his mind, and he's like he again in kind like nails through this guy's junk essentially, but again like does it with his mind, and then he like sucks him into the floor with his mind, and I'm like, hold on a second, when did Bill Pullman become
wizard master,
like a telekinetic kind of like, what's going on? And then the psychiatrist lady comes in, and she sort of like brings him round, like she sort of taps him on the shoulder or something, and he like, and it's, I think all of that has been done in his mind. And there is a line earlier on in the movie when one of the other kind of, so he's also like a voodoo priest, but he's the good priest, and another kind of friend on the ground who's giving them kind of like information and stuff. He says like this final battle won't be fought in the real world, it'll be like done in your mind, and I think like in your soul. Kind of so there is, for a minute you are sort of thinking like, hold on a minute, when did this turn into
fantasy movie?
But I think it's all meant to be that he's sort of battling the guy, like
and it's that same kind of idea of this zombie thing, isn't it, that it actually is it all like chemical and medical essentially, and because they do emphasize quite a lot this idea of him dreaming and hallucinating and stuff, I think you can make an argument for that, I guess.
And so when he's in the Amazon right at the beginning, and he takes the potion that the shaman's given him, and then he that's when he starts kind of having the premonitions and stuff. So I don't know if we're supposed to think that like that experience in the Amazon has somehow, I don't know, like armed him to be the best person to go down and have this kind of confrontation in Haiti and stuff like that, because everything he dreams, like all of the scary dreams he has, like there's one where he's in a coffin, and there's like it's like filling up with blood, and he's kind of screaming. So I mean that is pretty, again, that whole thing about being buried alive. Also, do you know what's more scary than that? Putting a tarantula in the coffin with you.
Oh my god, then they just shove that in there.
Oh god.
And actually, again, it's that idea of like the idea of it being quite scary, and that that whole sequence like you mentioned earlier, we're seeing like his point of view when he is essentially paralyzed and being pronounced dead, and we're just like looking up at the ceiling while he's trapped in his own body, kind of thing. It's pretty grim, that scene, isn't it? It is. It's not the sort of, again, like 14-year-old me didn't find this particularly exciting, but I think when you watch it, and again just some of the ideas behind it, it's like fucking hell.
It's
full on.
It's really full on. It is.
And I like that it means that like it feels like quite a colourful film, which is quite nice, like all of those like crazy hallucinating scenes and everything means that Wes Craven gets to just be a bit wacky and fun as well, which is cool. There's
some cool imagery, definitely, and I think the fact that they did film it on location has a massive impact.
Really comes across.
It really does. And there's some very cool sort of slightly more like horror imagery where the guy gets burnt at the end and he's on fire and he sort of falls onto a pile of skulls. Like, I'm into that.
Always.
Yeah, I love a flaming body on top of a pile of skulls.
Oh, do you know what I didn't like? Well, I liked it, but I didn't like it. Which was the dinner party when the woman just starts like crunching on the glass, the wine glass. It's like, oh, that is horrible. Yeah. It's a good moment. That was a good moment. Didn't quite understand what was happening at that point, but it was a great moment.
And like similar to that is at the like ritual that they do for the tourists earlier in the film. That guy who's like eating the like hot coals.
Yes, I know. What the fuck?
That is,
yeah.
That's some power right there.
That's it. So it's not as if this movie doesn't have some like proper nastiness and horror.
So when Wade Davis sold the rights to the book, he sold them on the sole condition that the film be directed by Peter Weir and starred Mel Gibson.
Oh my God.
Neither of whom were in any way attached to the final film.
Brilliant.
But I would love to see the Peter Weir Mel Gibson version of The Serpent and the Rainbow, because I don't think it would have flaming bodies on top of piles of skulls. And I think it would be a lesser film for it.
Absolutely. And I think you're right, like when you use the word swashbuckling, there was something swashbuckly about it, like an adventure film. Almost like, again, if you took the horror elements out, it's like Indiana Jones or Romancing the Stone or something like that.
I was going to say Romancing the Stone.
Yeah. It's got that vibe.
He's definitely got that kind of Michael Douglas, like shirt unbuttoned, one button too many, little bit sweaty, that lovely floppy hair.
Yeah. It's true. It's quite Michael Douglas, better than Michael Douglas.
I would say so.
Bill Pullman has had a weird career as well, hasn't he? Like, it feels like he's never quite like become maybe as big as he could have or something. I suppose he did some massive films like Independence Day, but you know.
The range of different types of film that he's done. So he's done Spaceballs.
Yes.
Lost Highway.
Oh my God.
While You Were Sleeping.
Yes.
Independence Day. You know, this is like screwball comedy. Fucking like David Lynch thriller, nightmare thriller. Romantic comedy, massive blockbuster.
Brilliant.
Like, just what a
guy.
Lake Placid.
Lake Placid.
Lake Placid.
Was he in that? I don't even remember him being in that.
That is Bill Pullman, isn't it?
Probably is. I think
he's the main guy.
Amazing.
Oh my God, I'm sure it is.
No, I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is. It's just because I haven't seen it in so long. I don't remember any of the people in it. I just remember the big alligator. But what a film.
Betty White's amazing.
What a film. Amazing. So anything else you want, anything else we've missed or anything else you want to mention on The Serpent and the Rainbow?
I want to mention Mozart.
Oh, yeah.
I love him so much.
He's great.
He's such a nice guy. I feel like he's a really like multi-layered, interesting character. Totally. At first you kind of think, he's this,
kind of con artist or
exactly.
something. Yeah.
And then, it turns out, like he does con them, but then you find out, like he's legit. Yeah. And, Bill Pullman, a lot of voiceover in this film.
Yes.
Haven't discussed that yet.
Is that
an interesting choice?
And is that
isn't
directly
it?
from the book then? Is that what that is? I was assuming they've just taken passages from the book there to use as narration, but otherwise it's a bit weird.
It's an interesting choice.
It's like it's his idea of still making it feel like it's a true life story or something, like this person's account of what happened to him.
Yeah,
it very much starts off with the caption, doesn't it, being like, "This is a true story," blah blah blah. You know. Magic and all.
I know. Jaguars and all.
Yes. But sorry, Mozart.
Yeah, so he says, the voiceover, Dr. Allen says about Mozart when he's actually creating the genuine powder out of the puffer fish and like the human bones and all of the other ingredients. He says like this guy could have put a load of Harvard scientists to shame or something like that. Like
that's right. Yeah.
He's a skilled chemist essentially.
Yeah.
And then like he shows that he's like really trustworthy, and he comes and gives him the powder at the end on the plane and like sneaks onto the plane.
I know. And poor guy, he's just like tell them my name still, like tell them that I made it,
exactly.
Kind of thing. And you think, no, there's no way he would have gotten any credit for it. Yeah.
I know. And then he gets beheaded.
Oh. Poor Mozart.
Honestly, and I just really love him as a character.
Yeah,
he
really fascinating character.
Yeah, really fascinating. Just really develops over the film, and again, just really brilliantly written. And I was genuinely sad when he died. Yeah. So this is, I just wanted him to get a mention because I think he earned it.
Yeah. What about the female, the psychologist, the psychiatrist? I mean, I feel like she could have maybe had a bit more to her. She was a little bit on the periphery, wasn't she? Literally,
our introduction to her is Bill Pullman's voiceover saying something like, I wasn't expecting to feel the darkness from the Amazon when I got to Haiti, and I wasn't expecting the doctor to look quite like she did. Yes, and it's dude, really? I know it's 1988, but
I know.
Stop being such a dick.
I know.
Obviously, you get the obligatory horror tit shot later as well.
Right,
very important.
Of course. Yeah.
I'm not sure. I would say that the central romance storyline is probably one of my least favourite things about this film. As well. Very unnecessary. Very unnecessary.
Yeah, it was really weird that. I did love the image. I think it's after they've slept together, and then there's that moment when he sees the boat coming towards them that's on fire.
Yeah,
loved that. That was a really creepy
really,
image.
Really cool.
Yeah.
And it's got the kind, like you say, like the flaming. It's got the kind of figure at the front that's kind of almost like in a crucifix pose.
Exactly.
And,
that's good.
Yeah,
I like that.
That is a good image.
There's lots of good imagery in this. Definitely,
really
ones
good.
that will stay with me.
Yeah, like I say, the production design is strong. Yeah, really, really good.
Yeah. Amazing. So overall, I mean, would you recommend this to horror fans? This movie, and it's feels like so different to any other zombie movie we've discussed, which is really nice. But yeah, would you kind of recommend this to genre fans?
I would recommend it. I think it's a really well made film. Mm-hmm. It's not the zombie film that maybe people wanted from Wes Craven, and maybe that's why it is this kind of middle tier in his kind of portfolio. But I mean, I think it's a good movie. I really do. And it's the sort of horror that I would chuck on a Sunday afternoon.
It's very Sunday afternoon.
It really is.
It's that swashbuckling-ness as well, isn't it? Yeah.
It's quite an easy watch.
Yeah.
When the horror comes, it's effective.
Yeah.
And it's not, it's not particularly extreme. You could watch it over your Sunday brunch quite easily.
Yeah. Although, a bit of scrotum hammering, that's maybe, I don't know.
I mean, that is really takes it like a champ though, doesn't he?
My God, he does. He
just went through the scrotum.
What a hero. Yeah, just pierce the skin, nothing else. No biggie, whatevs.
Look, you stupid bastard, you've got no arms left.
Just a flesh wound.
Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you
It's
for
been
asking me.
Amazing. Final question: what's your favourite zombie movie?
Okay. I think Dawn of the Dead is number one for me.
Yeah.
I love the effects in it mainly. I could just watch it. I could just watch that for days.
Yeah.
There's something about, for me, having a Romero as my number one. I don't know.
Yeah.
There's definitely there's a sort of extra layer there that I'm just well, it has to be a Romero because he's he's the zombie guy.
Of course.
But I have a very special place in my heart for 28 Days Later.
Yeah.
But
my God, it's fucking terrifying.
What a fucking movie.
It scares the shit out of me.
It is you're right, it's terrifying.
There's not many zombie films that are that terrifying.
Viscerally.
Yes. You hold your breath for 90 minutes watching it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I just think it's a fucking brilliant movie. And again, some of the imagery in that,
God. Yeah.
The early morning shot on the bridge and
God.
Just what a film. And I've got to give a special mention to Night of the Comet as well, which I absolutely adore.
Amazing. I haven't seen that in years.
It's just, that ticks so many boxes for me. It's sort of super kitsch 80s big
massively.
hair.
Yeah.
that's quite a recent discovery. I've probably only seen that in the last sort of 18 months or something.
Amazing.
And just felt like didn't really know what to expect. Again, quite a good sort of Sunday afternoon thing. Just chuck it on, let it wash over you. And I was just over the moon. I loved it. I thought it was so good. Yeah, very, very much my kind of movie. So I wanted to give that a special mention as well.
Amazing. And it's on Netflix, so people can check it out.
It definitely was.
It's on one of the streaming services. Yeah, amazing. Cool. Thank you so much. Where can people find you, and where can people, and just one more time as well, tell us about your podcast and where they can find it.
So if you want to follow me, I am on Twitter as Bunny Darke. The podcast across all socials is Point Horror Pod. It's the actual name of the podcast is Don't Point That Horror at Me. But yeah, you can find us at Point Horror Pod.
Brilliant.
That's me.
Amazing. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mike.
There was me, that is Alex, and my 3 droogs, that is Pete, Georgie and Dim. And we sat in the Corova Milk Bar trying to make up our Razoo Docs what to do with the evening.
Hello there, Mike here. Now that was a clip you just heard. I'm sure most of you probably recognised it. It is of course a clip from the 1971 controversial classic, A Clockwork Orange. So interestingly, this week Stanley Kubrick's A Clockwork Orange has been re-released. It is back in cinemas in the UK. So we thought to celebrate that, why not give the movie the discussion that it deserves? Now you could argue that this isn't a horror movie, but I would argue that this movie is one of the most disturbing in cinema history, and regardless of whether or not it was designed to be a traditional horror, I think there are certainly a lot of elements of that movie that are designed to repulse, to disgust, to disturb and to terrify. So this week patrons will be treated to an exclusive discussion with Mike Lee Graham on Stanley Kubrick's masterpiece. We discuss the movie in spoilerific detail from beginning to end. It's a great discussion. So if you are a patron of the Evolution of Horror, you will have access to that later on this week. Not only that, there will also be a review of the brand new Pet Sematary movie which came out this week. Anna Wilczek, who I'm about to discuss the 1980s version with, she also discussed with me the 2019 version, so you can also hear that full review on the Patreon page. So if you want to become a patron of the Evolution of Horror and support everything we do here and help defray some of the costs of making the podcast, all you need to do is go to patreon.com/evolution of horror, and if you donate $5 per month, that's just £3.80, you will have access to all of these bonus episodes, to the in-depth review of A Clockwork Orange, of Pet Sematary. Last week we had a review of Us. A couple of weeks before that we had a Video Nasty special. We had a discussion of Art versus Artist with Becky Darke. We've got loads of incredible bonus episodes for you to listen to. And not only that, if you are a UK listener, you will also get sent an Evolution of Horror sticker. And I am very soon to launch the Evolution of Horror merchandise store, in which patrons will get first dibs and discounts. So you will get all of those treats and much more when you sign up. And on that note, I'm going to give everyone who's signed up and pledged $5 over the last couple of weeks a special shout out. So a big thank you to Henry Aldridge, Sean Kelly, Darren McAllister, Octane, Martin Bryant, Paul Timmons, Penelope McAdams, Pete Iacono, Tom Heel, William Exley, Andrew Coker, Judd Krellin, Martha Ward, Simon Rush, Michael Walters, Liam Porter, Liz Davis, Saw Tunn, Dave Freebs, John Hargreaves, Tom Cox, Bruce Cowie, Abe Smith, Matthew Draper, Elysia Tare, Joanna Cortez, and Owen McSweeney. Owen, a hugely generous donation you made this week as well, so thank you so much, and thank you so much to everyone for donating their hard-earned money and helping to support everything we do here. So if you want to reap all of those benefits, just log on to patreon.com/evolution of horror and enjoy. Now it's time to play you the second and final discussion of the episode. I sat down with a brand new guest. She writes for various different film outlets such as Film Stories. She also works in film marketing, which is where we first met, and I sat and chatted to her about all things Pet Sematary. So here is my chat with the brilliant Anna Wilczek.
Okay, welcome Anna Wilczek. Hello.
Hi.
First of all, tell me a bit about yourself, Anna, who you are, what you do.
I have worked in marketing for filmy or television bits and pieces for a few years now. So Sky Cinema, Channel 4 and Filmstruck, which is where
Filmstruck.
we met.
Yeah. R.I.P. Filmstruck.
R.I.P. Filmstruck. And then, I do other bits and bobs. So do film stories reviews for Simon Brew's new magazine.
Yes, very cool.
Volunteer at Medicinema. And then also I've been doing a couple of bits and pieces on the film show on Hospital Radio Medway recently.
Very cool.
But yeah.
Nice.
So a variety.
A variety of filmy things. Love it. Let's talk first of all. I'll ask you what I ask every new guest. Kind of, what is your relationship with the horror genre? I mean, have you always been a big horror fan?
I've always been a big film fan, not necessarily horror because I'm a bit of a scaredy cat. And yeah, particularly with things like slasher films when I was growing up, and I wrote something about it on your blog.
Yes,
I was quite, for want of a better word, I was a bit pathetic. But I think I discovered true crime documentaries, and that kind of came through watching David Fincher's Zodiac, and then I got quite obsessed with a variety of like slasher films. I've always enjoyed kind of your more classic films. Like one of my favourite films of all time is The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. Which,
nice.
Yeah, is sometimes cited as the first horror movie, but I'm not 100% sure if that is true.
I think it is.
One of them.
It's especially kind of feature length. It isn't like a short or something. I would say it is one of the first, definitely, yeah.
Yeah, so that's one of my favourites, kind of along with Carrie, Jaws, Halloween. So it's all kind of on the classic side of things.
Interesting. And are you a fan of Stephen King? Crucially,
well, one of my favourite films is Carrie. So generally,
of course.
And yeah, when I was thinking about, and you were going to have this chat and thinking about some of the top adaptations of Stephen King, there are so many.
There are hundreds.
And there are some which are very, very good, and some which are
not so good.
Not so good, which I may not even bother to watch. But yeah. I'm usually interested to see a Stephen King adaptation. That doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to enjoy it, but I usually want to see what people are going to do.
Yes, and I think fundamentally his stories are usually really good and scary. It's just whether or not the adaptations do them justice a lot of the time. But then interestingly, some of the adaptations that stray most from the books are the better ones, aren't they? Like Stanley Kubrick's The Shining and stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
which is a film that he notoriously hated and then remade on television, and it's not good.
Shit version.
So and he wrote the screenplay for this, and as we'll talk about with Pet Sematary, there are some things that
issues
are missing, and it's bizarre that the screenplay is written by the author. So
hit and miss. There is definitely that. There's a difference, isn't there, between writing a great novel and making a great film. That's the thing, and they are not the same thing. Set. Completely different skill set, absolutely. So before we get into Pet Sematary, let me ask you a bit about zombies as well. I mean, zombies as a subgenre that we've been talking about for what feels like years. What are your thoughts on the zombie movie?
So I think it depends on the film. I am a fan of the zombie genre. I've seen some very bad zombie films. So, for instance, thinking about it, what immediately springs to mind, World War Z, whatever it's called, it did not love. I think it had the potential, again, a book adaptation to be fantastic. I'm very disappointed that David Fincher isn't directing the sequel, because I think that could have turned me around a bit if he was reuniting with Brad Pitt. But I'm a fan of the Romero zombie.
Yeah.
And Evil Dead, as I'm sure most people are.
Classics,
and I also don't mind the remakes of Dawn of the Dead and Evil Dead. I'm not a massive fan, but I think they have their place. And then I'm also quite a big fan of probably because I was a scaredy cat for so long, so the zombie comedy, so whether that's Shaun of the Dead or Zombieland or One Cut of the Dead.
What is it about zombies that are so that what makes zombie movies so popular, do you think? Like, why do people love making them? Why do people love watching them?
So I mean, I think it varies from person to person, to be honest, and the most obvious answer is there's that fear of death and just being chased by something that has no motivation apart from to eat you.
Yes.
And it's the kill.
There's no reasoning with it.
No, exactly. No reason, kill or be killed mentality that's genuinely quite frightening. But also, kind of the opposite of that, the threat of eternal life and, watching everything around you dying.
Yes.
Or, no, it's nothing like Get Out, but that element where you're trapped in a state that you can't control and you're kind of trapped in a vessel.
Yeah, well, definitely. With like the old school voodoo zombies, that is the fear, isn't it?
Cannot control anything that's going on and you're basically within a monster.
Yes.
And I think that and it's the fact that it's just this soulless version of ourselves or those people that we love. And talking about the remake of Dawn of the Dead, it's so effective because of the use of a child during that opening scene. And I think that's what's so frightening, is something that's completely harmless and unthreatening then becomes your worst nightmare. And
as we'll talk about with Pet Sematary as well.
Exactly.
Crucially,
and Uncanny Valley. Again, I know that's regularly brought up, but something that appears to be human but is in fact
something else.
Yes.
What is this place?
I brought you here to bury Alan's cat.
Daddy, is church all right?
Why, Judd?
I have my reasons.
I dreamed he got hit by a car and you and Mr. Crandall buried him in the pet cemetery.
What did we do tonight, Judd?
What we did, Lois, was a secret.
May the Lord bless you and keep you.
Has anyone ever buried a person up there?
May the Lord make his face to shine upon you.
You're thinking thoughts best not thought of.
Daddy's gonna do something really bad.
You're thinking of putting him up there. Don't deny the thought hadn't crossed your mind.
Come back to me, Gage. Come back to us.
Paramount Pictures presents Stephen King's all-time best-selling tale of horror. Pet Sematary.
Anna, do you mind giving a little plot rundown, first of all, of Pet Sematary?
So, this is the adaptation from Stephen King's novel, I think from the early 80s. A couple move from the city, I think, to Ludlow with their two children, Ellie and Gage. I think Ellie's around 9 and Gage is about 2.
Yeah.
And their very important British short hair cat, Winston Churchill, also known as Church. And when they arrive at their new home, they realise that it's maybe not as idyllic as it may have seemed. I'm really not sure why they did buy that house with a cat and small children.
Why move there?
With all the vans and the trucks. It's a very strange decision. But they discover a pet cemetery on the property. And then when Ellie's cat, Church, is actually run over and killed by one of the trucks, their neighbour Judd takes the father to the pet cemetery and then past the pet cemetery into an Indian burial ground where the cat is then buried and comes back to life, but isn't quite the sweet, loving, sweet-smelling cat that he used to be. And then the 2-year-old boy, their 2-year-old little boy, Gage, is killed on the road, and Lewis decides that he's going to employ the same tactics that he used to bring back the cat, and ignores his neighbour saying that, their little boy isn't going to come back the same. And when he does come back, he is a little Chucky-like monster.
Yes.
Who then kills Judd, his mother, and tries to kill his dad before he puts him down. And then Lewis looks to be stuck in the same cycle with his wife.
Exactly.
It's quite depressing to talk about that.
It is. And actually, very unusual, I think, for a zombie movie. Even though zombies are all about death, but there's not that many that actually deal with death and the grief and the loss like Pet Sematary does. Usually it's just another person's dead with most zombie films, but this is
it's Stephen King. He does like a bleak end.
Oh my God, Stephen. Right, so yeah, and actually I want to start off by asking you, I'll ask you what you thought about it, but interesting, I'm sure a lot of people know this, but Stephen King himself is a big fan of this book, of all of his books. His introduction, I've got it here. He literally starts introducing the book and he says, "When I'm asked, as I most frequently am, what I consider to be the most frightening book I've ever written, the answer I give comes easily and with no hesitation: Pet Sematary. It may not be the one that scares readers the most. I guess the one that does that is probably The Shining. But the fear bone, like the funny bone, is located in different places on different people. All I know is that Pet Sematary is the one I put in a drawer thinking thinking I had finally gone too far. Which is, I mean, that's...
It's a lovely introduction to a book.
It's a great introduction because it's just like, holy shit, you're in for something really, really dark here. So he thinks it's his most dark, frightening book he's ever written. Based on this film, what do you think? Do you agree with that?
I think it depends how you look at it. For Stephen King, he based quite a lot of this on his own life in the sense that his daughter's cat was run over and I think it's literally verbatim is her getting upset and saying, why can't God have his own cat? Why does he have to take mine? So, that was real life. And then from what I understand, his little boy nearly got hit by a truck, which is terrifying in itself. And he just kind of thought about, well, what would happen if he actually had been hit by the truck and dealing with that grief. And I think, I think we were talking about this the other day, that it's a parent's biggest fear is the loss of a child.
It's like the ultimate fear,
exactly.
Isn't it, really?
And you can't, I think it's scary because if you think about what happens, but nothing's ever going to be as scary as the internalized fear that you're going to have when you're thinking about that. And in contrast to that, the death of Ellie's cat to her, she doesn't ever know that he died, but if he had died, her reaction to anything associated with death she's not old enough to understand it, and I think that that's equally as heartbreaking. It's kind of, however you look at it, it's a nightmare for whoever's involved, and I think that's the side of things that makes it scary. I think the film has aged, so I think you have to view it within its time, but it didn't necessarily scare me as an adult. I think it scared me a bit more as a child. I wouldn't have been a child because I would have been too scared to watch it. So let's say as a teen, and it's quite gory, but I think that the idea behind the film is terrifying.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. It's similar with so many Stephen King things, actually, because I found this with The Shining. I think like what scared me in The Shining as a child is different to what scares me about it as an adult. There are different themes, and it's the same with It. I was obviously just terrified by the clown, Tim Curry's clown, when I was a kid, and then watching it as an adult, you're like, oh, this town is really sinister, these parents are really frightening, and when you suddenly see it with your adult eyes, there are all these other fears. And I guess it's the same with Pet Sematary. I agree. Like, I think it's the horror on screen in this film that used to frighten me as a kid, which we'll talk about. Like, the Chucky child and Zelda, obviously, and all these other things. But more as an adult, it's like, oh my god, imagine going through that. Like, and I suppose it's the idea of it and the grief. And I think it's weird because horror is so much about death, but I don't think many horror films are really about grief. It's one of the things that Hereditary, I think that's another reason why Hereditary is so hard to watch as well, because it like properly hits you with the consequences of death and loss and that kind of thing, isn't it?
Or the very, very, very end of The Mist.
Oh yeah, nothing compares to The Mist. That's really out there. I agree. And the film I think the film has flaws, definitely, which we'll get into. And it's not the best Stephen King adaptation, that's for sure. It's no The Shining, is it? Let's be honest.
I mean, I think he's got a lot of competition. I mean, even if you think about the top, it's quite easy to get to 8 amazing Stephen King adaptations, like even just the ones that people know about or that are in the mainstream.
And of course, when you go out of the horror genre, even you think about Shawshank and Stand By Me and The Green Mile. I mean, there are some amazing ones. But however, having said all that, I personally, and it's that nostalgic link, I think, with it, I love this movie, and I think maybe because I loved it so much as a scary movie when I was a kid, really, and it terrified me, traumatized me as a child, and so I still have a lot of love for it. But I rewatched it recently for this, and I was like, "Ooh, it does have some problems, doesn't it?"
Well, the road is a lot more dangerous than any operation. Church will be just the same, well, almost the same, and we won't have to worry about him getting run over in the road by trucks. Church will be all right, honey.
You promise, Daddy?
Don't shilly-shally, Lewis. Give the little girl a promise.
Church will be fine. I promise.
Yay!
And I think, when watching it again, I was able to kind of boil down what the problem is with this. And I think it is, I think that Mary Lambert does a fantastic job at directing this movie. I think that where it works is where Mary Lambert has brought incredible terrifying, nightmarish visuals and sound effects. The sound design, I think, is phenomenal, which we'll get into later. But I think what she does is bring about these kind of truly nightmarish, uncanny images. And that's not something you get that often in zombie movies. But Mary Lambert really evokes them. I think maybe the problems in this movie, ironically, are Stephen King's. And it's because Stephen King himself has done the screenplay, right? And I think it's that maybe that classic thing of not wanting to cut out too much from the book. So what's happened is it's a very dense, almost whistle-stop tour of the book where a lot of elements are kind of dropped in but not really explored in depth. You don't really get a great sense of kind of character or thematic coherence. Instead, you get a series of really brilliant, terrifying set pieces. And of course, I think there are some big problems maybe with a couple of the performances as well, which doesn't help.
Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. But if anything does happen while he's under the gas, now it's a 1 in 1,000 shot, but it does happen. You explain it to her.
Yeah, I think that when I was kind of thinking about the film, visually, I actually think it's a really good film if you're just looking at what's going on screen. The screenplay isn't wonderful. The dialogue isn't great, but I think there's a lot that can be done with dialogue if you've got very competent actors. And the most likable characters are the old man, Judd, and the 2-year-old.
Yeah,
so I think that when that is the case, you're meant to identify with the lead character of Dale Midkiff as Lewis.
Yeah, he's our hero.
He's our hero in inverted commas, but he's not very likable. He's also he's probably because he's not very good. Nothing seems natural. He's really stiff. There's no chemistry between him and his wife. She calls him Doc all the time, which I still find odd. Yeah, she never calls him by his name, really.
No.
And the only time that I find him to not be acting like a wooden plank is when he's naturally interacting with the children, particularly with Gage, because he is reacting to a 2-year-old, and therefore
he's not acting, is he?
No, he's the affection that he is showing is genuine. And I think that for instance, there's the proper emotional devastating moment. He does that comic no with a million O's on the end that just every time that he's meant to be traumatized, so Pasco's just come back from the dead, he doesn't seem to care. When he's crying on the floor, again, there's no emotion, there's nothing going on behind his eyes. I'm not an actor, I'm sure it's very difficult. But
I'm sure it's a challenging part because of how much this character goes through.
Yeah.
However, they could have got someone a lot better.
And we have seen it now done.
We have.
How, without ruining too much, I liked Jason Clarke's Lewis.
Totally.
I didn't like this Lewis.
Yeah.
And therefore, when sad things happen to him, although, again, the premise is scary, I don't think it's as upsetting as it maybe should be.
Yes, agreed. I do think his performance is one of the worst I've seen in a movie that I've liked. It is. I think Denise Crosby, who plays Rachel, the wife, is pretty bad, and I think Dale Midkiff is worse. And I think that's the problem. And I agree exactly with what you said. I think the strongest performance in the whole film is the toddler, Gage, played by Miko Hughes, and of course the brilliant Fred Gwynne, who played Judd Crandall. They are the two, the old man and the child. And some of these other performances are dreadful, and I do think that is what lets the film down a little bit. And I think, you're right, maybe the script, and like you said at the beginning, Stephen King wrote the script himself. This is a film that is so kind of beloved to him, and that he felt so such a personal connection with, that he apparently was quite reluctant to sell the rights to it. And then it was a condition, apparently, that he said, I'll sell you the rights for even cheaper. I won't ask for millions, I'll just ask for $1,000 if
you shoot it in Maine because he loves Maine and he wanted to boost the economy, and you have to shoot it in Maine, and I have to write the screenplay because I guess again he'd been hurt by people like Stanley Kubrick, sort of bastardizing his books, so he wanted to have control over this. So that was one of the reasons that he gave the rights. It was one of his conditions, basically, that he writes the script. But
there's some really random bits in it, like Missy, the maid, kills herself.
That's weird.
How is it meant to be like the Omen? Is she doing it for
it felt
the
like something
Pet
like
Cemetery
that.
for Gage? Like, what is it for?
Yeah,
she's introduced to us twice, and then she kills herself and writes a note that's never really kind of investigated. It's again seems like a device to introduce Ellie to death once again. But then this child that's apparently traumatized by death goes to a funeral. It's strange parenting. And then the Wendigo, which is featured in the book, which is, for people who haven't read the book, is a primal demon that's cursed the burial ground. They hear it. Apparently, it was in initial scripts, and they removed it because they react to it in the woods. It's a loon, and it's in there a couple of times. But it's just brushed over completely, and it's just there are a couple of storytelling devices that seem strange or don't work. Pasco is another one where he's kind of underused or used comically, unintentionally. I'm not sure.
It does become a comic character the more it goes on, doesn't he? It is a weird movie in that respect as well. I guess a little bit like The Shining, where it throws everything in. It's like Indian burial grounds, demons. There's basically Victor Pascoe is basically a ghost, zombies, like. It's kind of turns into a slasher at the end. Like, it's got everything in it, hasn't it? It kind of throws everything at you. And it takes somebody like Stanley Kubrick maybe to make all of those elements work. Whereas, it does feel a little bit like, and we'll talk about this because we're going to talk about the remake too, but the remake did, I think, quite a good job of kind of threading all of the elements together and like making
a cohesive narrative. Right?
Yeah, cohesive. They connected in some way or another in a way that felt more organic. Whereas this does feel a little bit like a series of set pieces. Yeah. It's like, oh, now it's the bit with Zelda. Oh, now it's the bit with the scalpel. Oh, now it's the bit with Pasco or whatever. You know.
But even like with Judd Crandall, he is a really kind man. You know, with the sense that. When he's talking to Ellie after the death of Gage, like, he's so sympathetic, and when he's talking to her about that picture, and he's really sweet. But then there's a moment where Lewis is burying the cat when Judd kind of looks at the camera, like really sinister and knowingly. And for me, I was like, sorry, are you supposed to be, I thought you were supposed to be a nice old man. Like, why are you looking at the camera? And then it's just odd.
Yes.
He is a lovely character. You're meant to like him, but then there's the odd glance where he seems to have been directed, or it's been written for him to be like all knowing and a little bit winky, and it's very odd. I
think because ultimately he is a nice character and he means well, but what he brings to the family is all of this horror, right? And he's the one who introduces him to this idea of the pet cemetery and stuff.
I told you it's a bad road, Lois. It's killed a lot of pets, and a lot of kids unhappy. There's something good on with it. This place. Couldn't plant nothing but corpses here anyway, I guess.
How can you call it a good thing? A graveyard for pets killed in the road. Built by broken-hearted children.
Well, they have to learn about death somehow, now don't they, Ms. Reed?
Why?
And I think that the kind of the grief subject is problematic due to the performance of the lead. And you don't as I said, like, you don't necessarily really identify with him, but with Judd, he kind of summarizes it when he's talking about Ellie. The reason that he took him to the pet cemetery and beyond is because Ellie wasn't ready to kind of say goodbye to her cat, and it gives her more time to learn what death is. And that when the pain stops and the good quoting it, and when the pain stops and the good memories begin. And I think that that's actually quite sweet, and then that kind of leads into discussions about heaven and hell. And, you know, do we go on, do we not? And that obviously leads into the whole Zelda terror, because Rachel is convinced that Zelda's going to come back and get her.
Yeah. And it is, I do like that it kind of explores the way different people kind of react to grief. Like, it feels like Ellie kind of in some ways deals with it the best out of everyone. Like, the parents deal with it the worst. You know, Lewis chooses to, he's almost, it's like a denial thing, isn't it? He's like, let's just bring them back kind of thing. And Rachel kind of doesn't want to think about or talk about death ever, does she? She doesn't want to confront. She just medicates, exactly. Because of Zelda, which is a brilliant backstory. But yeah, I think, you know, it is interesting, like they kind of explore the stages of grief and the way different people can react to grief and all of that kind of thing. It's all really interesting. Yeah, like you say, I think could have been even better had it been handled by better performances, maybe in those two lead roles. I guess what, you know, if you were being generous, you could say that these parents are in shock and they're still at this kind of shock stage, and that's why they seem so emotionless. But
because they're the worst parents in the world.
They are the worst parents in the world. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? Within the first 3 minutes of this movie, they have already let Gage run into the road and nearly get hit by a truck. It's only Judd that manages to save them.
Just literally from the middle of the road. He's actually standing in the middle of the road, like looking at this truck.
It's a scary scenario because it's very real. It is very realistic. You know, toddlers do wander into the road and all that kind of thing. So it's done quite well in that regard. Like, and the way it kind of balances, quote unquote, sort of real life horrors with all of this supernatural stuff. And and it's, again, it's kind of, I don't know how much it cared about or wanted to dwell on the kind of folk horror aspect of it, like these kind of this kind of evil in the woods, or this demon thing, or these rituals and ceremonies. It's kind of a little bit glazed over as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it's mentioned, and then we don't see anything, or you hear the Wendigo, and that's kind of it.
I think it's because, again, the book is quite long, right? There's a lot of
very long.
It's very long. There's a lot of detail, which really helps though get you kind of behind different kind of story threads in a way. Like, there's a whole backstory about Lewis and his parents-in-law and how much they hate each other, and there's all of these different elements that come into it but Stephen King kind of in his screenplay still tries to put all of those elements in, but very briefly. So there's
no
like
backstory and no
backstory. So if you just watch the film, you're like, well, why is he having a fight with his father-in-law, and why is that happening, and why is he suddenly angry about having to take the cat to go and get his balls chopped off and stuff? And like, again, it kind of, there's a whole thing about that in the book, but in the film it just looks a bit weird, doesn't it? Because it's like, well, why are they suddenly angry at each other about this, you know? My
favourite bit is that if we cut his balls off, he won't run into the road. I've never heard that before.
That's because Judd says, you've got to get him fixed.
Yeah, he's like, get him fixed. He'll be fine. And he's like, yeah, we're getting him fixed, Ellie. Then he won't get run over at all. Lies, more lies.
My little girl's got a cat. Winston Churchill. Call him Church for short.
I'd get him fixed. Why, fixed cat don't tend to wander.
I know we've touched upon this, but I do love Fred Gwynne though as Judd, because I like when you read him in the book and when you listen to the audiobook with Michael C. Hall, you know, you realise how perfect the casting was with Fred Gwynne. I think he just is that guy, isn't he? Really?
The amount of times he says road as well.
Yeah,
I can't.
Road.
Yeah, I'm not even going to try.
Pet Sematary. And apparently that's a genuine accent, isn't it? That's a Maine accent, which I think's hilarious. Like, I want to go to Maine just so I can hear people talk like that.
Just record them.
Yeah. I want somebody to tell me dead is better. That is better.
I live just across the road. You want to watch out that road. Them damn trucks go back and forth all day and most of the night.
Yeah, I do think he does a good job. Again, it's that strange, slightly awkward mix of like quite funny and goofy at times, but also quite deep and serious at other times, which is kind of what this film has in spades.
And I like
really,
the fact that he's always wearing dungarees.
Always. Yeah. Let's talk about some of the real true horror elements of this then. I think like we'll get to, you know, Gage and the cat, but I think that one of the things that traumatizes most people about this film is Zelda. Zelda is a very scary character, and again, we've already mentioned this, but it's this weird uncanny nature of Zelda. I think the fact that she's supposed to be a young girl and she's played by an adult man.
Yeah, exactly,
really
and
doesn't help.
She doesn't look right, and that would be why.
Yes,
but if you're watching this when you're younger, you don't necessarily always make that connection.
No.
You just look at her and think, oh, that's a horrific monster. What is wrong with her?
Yes.
And the whole physicality of the role, the clicking of the bones, which I have a particular problem. If anyone cracks their knuckles, it makes me feel a bit ill.
Yeah, there's a kind of body horror element to Zelda as well. She's suffering with, I think, is it spinal meningitis?
Spinal meningitis, which I don't really understand.
I'm not sure that people look like Zelda.
Isn't any meningitis? But I'm not good with the science. But isn't any meningitis an element of spinal meningitis?
You'd think, yeah. I don't know the specifics.
No.
I'm not sure Stephen King knows the specifics,
because
to be honest.
I'm pretty sure that, she's very monstrous and grotesque, and I don't think that.
No, and again, you can make lots of arguments that this is the childhood memory of Zelda, right? This is what her little sister saw. She did basically see her as this monster in the attic, didn't she? That she was scared of, and it's that memory that lives on of her.
And she blames herself for letting the monster die and being happy that she's died.
Yeah,
but again, bad parenting, leaving a small child.
It is one of the all-time brilliant horror scenes, characters, whatever you want to call it. I think any moment with Zelda in that film is stunning. Like the weird, like dreamlike feel of it, like Mary Lambert, the way she directs it, and the kind of like weird tilted camera angles and the weird pictures on the walls and stuff.
And the voice, like going, Rachel. It's horrible.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And like the way she kind of looks into the camera. And the best one, I think, is the last time we see Zelda, which is the one that really literally gave me nightmares as a kid, where she's crouched like right at the back of the frame, and then she's like slowly moves towards the camera and is like yelling right down the camera lens, saying you'll never get out of bed again, or whatever it is. It's a really horrible. I used to have nightmares as a kid that Zelda was crouching in the corner of my room.
Oh.
Yeah.
I finally came back for you, Rachel. I'm going to twist your back like mine, so you'll never get out of bed again. Never get out of bed again. Never get out of bed again. Never get out of bed again.
Yeah, horrible. Properly traumatized me as a child, but it's brilliant, and it still holds up. I still think it's creepy.
Yeah, no, 100%.
But what about crucially, we're talking about this in a zombie movie context, I suppose, and we've got here a zombie cat. The first time so far this series, we've got a zombie cat to talk about.
I don't find Zombie Church scary. I find Zombie Church amazing. Mainly, I find it upsetting when the cat dies. Of course I do. I have a cat, and when I was rewatching this, he was getting very alarmed with the noises coming from Zombie Church. But I think Church is deliberately very cute. Gage is fascinated. And you can see that Gage is fascinated with Church from the beginning. One of the few lines he has is he just says his name.
Yeah.
He just keeps going. Church has one of my favourite moments in the film, which is when he terrorises Lewis in the bath with the rat that he throws at him, mainly because I don't like Lewis, and he's just bringing him a present. He's just so misunderstood.
Oh, that is so horrible. It's very again, this is more graphic in the book, but it is touched upon in the film how much Church smells and stuff when he comes back. And it's that classic zombie film thing of they're not just dead, they're like rotting corpses dead, these aren't just like ghosts or whatever. It's like they smell dead even.
And it's like, how much is he in cahoots with the evil, the general evil, from the burial ground?
Yeah.
And when essentially he and Gage take on Judd together, it's a duel.
Yeah.
One of them distracts him and then the other one pounces.
Yeah.
Where did you?
Yeah, my biggest issue with the cat is again, it's kind of a product of the time, and this is again coming from someone who really likes animals. Is that cat is clearly sedated when he's put down at the end,
right?
And it's just a bit awkward to watch.
When he puts the syringe in the cat.
When he puts in the cat syringe, that's not an effect. You can tell that cat's being sedated. It's just a bit. That's my only issue with the Church storyline. Otherwise, I love it. But again, it's not to make excuses.
Do you reckon that is true, that it was really sedated? Yeah, it probably is, isn't it? Because I did think that it was quite an uncomfortable watch, the way it just kind of flops its head down and he drops it. It was like, oh God. Yeah,
the cat's clear because it makes just the way that its body moves, but then again, it's difficult to watch. But it's an 80s film, and not to make excuses, but this is before it was really kind of talked about in terms of cruelty to animals or whatever.
Yeah, it's true. That's I hadn't even thought about that, but that is true. That is a particularly kind of horrific moment. And let's talk about Gage, because I think it's the same thing. And I think it's, again, like we talked about this the other night, but it feels like the ultimate taboo in most horror movies. You know, most horror movies, you don't kill the child and you don't kill the animals. That's usually a no-no. And this film does both, and that is what this film is all about, right?
It's what people will get more upset about. You know, if you kill a load of teenagers and people are like, oh, that's a shame. And then you kill a dog and everyone's like, oh my God, that's disgusting.
I know. It's so funny how we do not care about teenagers getting killed. They're still children, basically.
They are children.
They're mainly minors. But
they're not fluffy and cute.
No, there are no way. Nobody finds teenagers cute, let's be honest. Whereas toddler, and this is one of the cutest toddlers ever in any film. Yeah.
And also the first time I saw him was in Kindergarten Cop. And for anyone that hasn't seen Kindergarten Cop recently, he's a little boy who, when it's who's your daddy and what does he do?
Yep.
He says that his dad is a gynecologist and he looks at vaginas all day. And he's the most adorable little child. And I think that's why he comes across so well in the film. You know, it's also genuine from his little which is clearly, you know, how much of that is actually scripted and how much of that is the child.
Well, he does an amazing job either way, doesn't he? It feels like he's really acting, which again is a strange thing when you're looking at a kid that is essentially young enough to just be in a nappy still, you know? It's crazy. He's also the kid, Miko Hughes, this actor, and he was also in Wes Craven's New Nightmare, which is the last Freddy Krueger movie. He plays Heather Langenkamp's kid. And, you know, even in that movie, he's kind of possessed and becomes a sort of evil child as well, which is good. So it was like, he was almost typecast as a kid, as this type of child, which is brilliant.
This child is cute, but also really good at being creepy.
A knife, but I think he does a phenomenal job, and I think it's like you say, it's the first hour of the film where you're spending time with just this cutest, most adorable toddler, and then I just kept thinking, I'd love to ask Mary Lambert, like, how did you direct this? Like when he's coming at people with a scalpel, he's biting into Fred Gwynne's neck to eat the Adam's apple out, and you know, again, the moment when Lewis, it's similar to the kind of the disturbingness of the cat being put down when he sticks that syringe into the toddler's neck and Gage kind of whines and makes this noise. And, you know, by that point, we've seen so much ridiculous stuff, but it still gets me. I still think that's a really emotional, powerful image.
It's his reaction as well, though.
Yeah.
Like what he says no fair.
Yeah,
which is exactly what a child would say.
No fair. No fair. No fair, no fair.
And then kind of waddles off, like in a mood, in a tantrum. And that's when he kind of stops being this scary little Chucky-like zombie demon child and becomes a little toddler again. And it's, you know, you're like, oh, kill the little evil thing. But then when that happens, it's horrible.
And it's so, and again, it's a moment that in the hands of a better actor playing Lewis could have been an incredibly emotional moment, that point when he has to stick the syringe into his son's neck and put him down again. It is a horrible thing. That's the thing, isn't it, in context? But it's whether or not it was done justice by him. But I do think, I think Gage is what saves it. Like, he 100%. Makes that so powerful, that scene.
And I think that, I think it's unfortunate that Chucky came out, I think it was a year and a half before.
Well, I think it was riding that wave of Chucky craze, wasn't it? It is a Chucky film.
Yeah, I will watch Gage and be like, oh, look at the little doll running around. Like, I know that it's a toddler, but
it is 100% Chucky.
It's distracting.
It's like the little feet, the little hand grabbing the knife. It was totally stealing from Chucky.
First I played with Dad, then Mommy came, and I played with Mommy. We played, Daddy. We had an awful good time.
But from what I have read, apparently they used an artificial dummy for him as a stunt double in the dangerous scenes and shot him completely separate from the horror. But regardless, like, the direction that you would, again, just pretend you're eating that man's Adam's apple. Like, how do you direct
How did he do that? Yeah.
or 3-year-old. However, he's too young.
And again, what a great scene. The death of Judd is a great scene.
It's horrible.
It's horrible, yeah. It's done really well. The tension is built. I think where this film really succeeds is when it just becomes a schlocky horror film. But I think it's the problems with it are before that, when it's trying to be this like family emotional drama.
It takes too long to get to...
Yeah, and it's because of the performances and everything else. It's all a bit clunky. But when it really hits you with the horror in the final act, I think it's great. It still holds up, you know. And I love that moment when when he gets his Achilles heel cut open. I mean, there's nothing worse, is there?
No.
I just want to go back again briefly to what we said earlier as well about Mary Lambert creating these truly nightmarish images. I mean, I think we've already gotten a lot of tweets and feedback from people when we said we were covering this movie, sort of saying, you know, Zelda and some of these other scenes and moments from this film have, gave them nightmares. It gave me nightmares. It stayed with me for life. And Mary Lambert, that is not to be dismissed about a film like this. I mean, it really is truly frightening. And I think that is down to the way she shoots things. Like we've said, that kind of crazy, dreamlike Zelda sequence with the sort of misty lens and her sort of starting off in the very background of the shot and coming towards us and looking into the camera. All of those moments are truly terrifying. But also, I think I noticed this time around as well, the sound design is truly brilliant, I think. Little details like some of the music you hear at the beginning sounds like the trucks, these monstrous rattling trucks that come down the road and ultimately lead to all of this horror. And there are a lot of clever sound design moments like that throughout the film. Also, going back to that sequence in which Zelda sort of attacks Rachel, it's one of the scariest scenes in the film for so many reasons. And it starts with that creepy Zelda vision. Then we have that moment when Zelda, when she's at the camera screaming in our faces, she begins to cackle. And then slowly that cackle kind of evolves into Gage's laugh. And this is this should be a cute toddler laugh, but instead it's this horrible, creepy, demonic, monstrous thing. And then Rachel sees him for the first time, and he's wearing that weird kind of top hat and carrying a cane, like the painting that was in her hallway when she was growing up. And again, it's not really explained. It's like something out of Lynch. It's something that is dredged out of a pure nightmare, and I love that Mary Lambert just throws in some of these kind of visual flourishes and pulls them off so well. And of course some of these images do come from Stephen King's source material, but again I think it's just the way that Mary Lambert has translated some of it to the screen. I think she does a brilliant job.
I brought you something, Mommy.
And actually, we haven't spoken about Victor Pascoe properly. Like, what do you think of him? The way, first of all, just the point of him in the story. I mean, is he needed, Victor Pascoe?
I think it's a tricky one because he's meant to be the warning. Essentially, he's meant to,
Harbinger, isn't he?
Yeah, Lewis helped him, so he wants to help Lewis. But at the same time, it's represented in the film that he's the first person who takes Lewis kind of out to the Pet Sematary area in the night and is saying, "Don't go past."
Yes,
and
the soil is something about
the soil is sour.
That's it.
And
yeah,
he's very foreboding.
I just want to wake up. That's all.
The barrier was not meant to be crossed.
It's not my fault that you died. You were as good as dead when they brought you in.
The ground beyond is sour.
Then it becomes a little bit comical when, I don't think it's supposed to be comical. Maybe it's the 80s.
It kind of becomes like Patrick Swayze Ghost, right?
Yeah, it's like a bit. Mary Lambert has her built her career around directing Madonna videos and Janet Jackson videos, and it feels quite music video-esque, where he kind of pops up and he's like, oh, hello, yes, I'm warning you against what so-and-so's doing. And I think it's quite difficult to follow. You know, you kind of forget what his name is when Ellie's saying, oh, Pasco told me, and you're like, who's Pasco?
Yeah, what's the point of this character? Again, I think it's that thing of cramming everything from the book into the film. Yes, in a kind of shortened way. There are moments of it. I do think that the makeup looks good still, and it's still creepy when he wakes up in the night and he sees him just stood by his bedroom door. Yeah. That's quite creepy, and there are moments like that. But you're right. As it goes on, it becomes increasingly like a comic character.
It just feels really random, particularly at the end with Rachel, where he's like, hurry up, you need to hurry up. And you're just like, what's happening right now? She's not even... And I think, again, when you're talking about cramming stuff in, there's a psychic element in the book.
Yes.
And it's not really developed here. So it's just like, oh, Ellie's had a dream.
Yes.
She thinks her dad's going to do something. Pasco told her. Oh, Rachel's got someone telling her to do X, Y, and Z, or go here. And Lewis is being shown the grave. It doesn't really work because it's very rushed.
And there's I think it's the Stephen King connection. You know, I do think there are similarities with this and The Shining. You know, that kind of way of seeing dead people and kind of zombies and kind of ghosts and families and children and
dad losing his mind in a different way.
Exactly. There are definite like sort of thematic sort of similarities, aren't there? And something about Victor Pascoe reminds me of The Shining a bit. But I do wonder, with all the versions of this story, the book and the two adaptations, I'm never quite sure whether he's really needed. It's like, if you removed him altogether, would it make any difference to anything?
Yeah, you just need to stop Rachel from leaving, and then you don't necessarily need him because he's going to go to the graveyard Anyway,
Judd takes him there. That's the whole point.
He's going to ignore Judd, and Judd gives him warnings as well. So and even tells him stories. So he's not. Yeah, he's not a necessary plot device.
But I guess a kind of early first act scary scene.
Supernatural element, just reinforcing
supernatural element and a pacing element too, because I guess it would take a long time for the good stuff, quote unquote, to get going, you know, in this film.
Early gore.
Yeah, I guess it's just a first sign of like death is coming for this family or something as well, isn't it? A little bit. It's kind of sets the tone a bit. But yeah, it's an interesting one. I don't know. Anything else you want to mention? Any other highlights for you in Pet Sematary?
Highlights. So
we've probably covered most of the highlights.
I mean, I mentioned Church terrorizing Lewis. I think I really like the opening scene, if I'm honest. Like, I think it's quite Twin Peaks-esque, and it feels super ominous. I can't speak. And then the fact that then you're introduced to the first truck, which is essentially what the film is going to be about.
It is a good opening scene. You're right. It's like you get the kid, you get the toddler, you get the cat, you get the truck, all within that first 3 minutes or whatever.
And also you get a sticker that says, "Have you hugged your MD today?" Which is, I don't usually remember stuff like that, but it stuck out because it's just so cheesy and so 80s.
So cheesy. And again, this is the thing, and we talked about this before on the podcast with Stephen King. You know, The Shining is a Stanley Kubrick film, and that takes any cheesiness out. But Stephen King is quite a cheesy writer. For all of his horror, he always turns the emotion up to 11 as well on a lot of these things. And I think that's all there in this Pet Sematary as well.
Oh, yeah. And there are some Easter eggs. Like, I think there's something about a dog going wild. There's a Cujo reference.
Cujo,
and then
yes, there is.
There's a sign for Jerusalem's Lot. And then I guess the premonitions could be kind of like the shining ability.
Yeah. In the remake, there is a sign for Derry. People are queuing to get into Derry. I was thinking,
why would you queue to go into Derry?
Maybe it'll all be part of a big cinematic universe. That'll be the next thing, won't it?
Castle Rock.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's already happened, in fact, hasn't it? There you go. I'd love it if all the films in some way connected as well. That would be amazing. So we've talked about Mary Lambert briefly, but apparently they had some other people lined up to do this, and George Romero was set to direct this originally,
and then he went to do Monkey Shines instead. And then there were rumours, I don't know how true this is, or if it's just people fantasizing that Tom Savini was then going to do it.
Yes, I've heard that that's true as well. But then Tom Savini ended up doing the Night of the Living Dead remake, which came out the year after.
And Bruce Campbell as well as Lewis, which would have been amazing.
Would have been amazing. entirely opposite end of the spectrum in terms of the acting style.
So emotive.
It would have been the polar opposite, which would have been interesting. Yeah, I mean, that's so interesting, isn't it, really, considering we're talking about this in a zombie context, that George Romero and Tom Savini were both rumoured to have nearly done it. I wonder if they'd have done better jobs. I don't know how much of this is Mary Lambert's fault or Stephen King's, you know?
I think that it's... The thing is, if you've got a weak screenplay and weak actors, how much can you save it? And I think she does the best that she possibly can, and it's still creepy and it's still upsetting. And I think that, you know, given what she had to work with, she did the best job she possibly could.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because again, you know, it's such a... I think in terms of the book, Stephen King's books, it's one of the most popular. And I wonder, we'll see. Only time will tell how much people will love and embrace the new movie. But I don't feel like this movie has been particularly embraced by a lot of audiences. I think horror lovers maybe still like it and talk about it, but I think most other people have forgotten this film ever existed in a way.
Yeah,
it's like one of those 80s Stephen King adaptations that just got lost amongst all the others, you know?
I think maybe it's up for a resurgence with the new film.
Definitely. Amazing. Well, overall then, I mean, it's 30 years old now. As you say, we've got a new one. Would you still recommend this movie to horror fans and people listening who haven't seen it?
I would. I mean, I think that for people that enjoy the macabre nature of Stephen King films, yes, definitely. I think that I really enjoy this film. I know it sounds like we've been ripping it to bits a little bit, but just analysing it. But I mean, it was made in the late 80s. It has its place in time. The effects are pretty decent.
Yeah.
Particularly at the end, when everything ramps up, and the end with Rachel. I really enjoyed it, so I would recommend it. I think maybe don't watch it with your pets, or your small children.
Or children.
If you are a new mother, do not watch it.
No, definitely for parents, it's quite a scary film, isn't it?
But other than that, like I think that definitely if you're going to see the new one, watch this one first.
Yeah, I would say so.
Because I think they're an interesting pair.
Yeah, definitely. Because I think actually there are, and we're going to talk about this in another episode, but in the new one, there are hints towards the old one and like assumed knowledge in a way that they then play with, don't they?
They
which is
completely
really interesting.
play with your expectations and fake you out.
Yeah, it's really interesting, which most remakes don't do, so I kind of respected that. I agree with you. I would still recommend it. I think the problem is, I guess what the book is known for is being this very traumatic, very dark, bleak book about grief that is as much traumatic as it is scary.
Yeah.
I definitely wouldn't say the film is that. Just go and watch the film for what is essentially a glorified Chucky movie, really. Yeah. It is a fun, silly slasher with also terrifying Zelda and a scary cat and a couple of other like creepy images, basically. But other than that, it's not like this big exploration of grief or anything like that, because I think the film glazes over that stuff too much, or the performances don't work, or all the other things we've said about it. And it's right, we have sounded negative about it, but I think that's only because when you scrutinise it, there's quite a lot you could pick apart.
Yeah. And watch it for one of the best toddler performances ever.
Oh, phenomenal. Miko Hughes. I want to get him on this podcast at some point. He's brilliant. I love him. Okay, amazing. Well, Anna, thank you so much for joining me. And we're going to move on to a bonus episode, which patrons will be able to listen to, which will discuss the remake. Yeah. But just briefly, to sort of tease that, what would you give the remake? A thumbs up, thumbs down? What did you think of it?
I'd give it a thumbs up. I think, bearing in mind that I didn't watch the original as a child, maybe while I really enjoy it, I might be less close than some horror fans are to it, but I really enjoyed the remake, particularly because of the cast.
Yes, agreed. I think it will never hold the place in my heart that the original does for nostalgic reasons, but I would say if you dissect most of the elements, like the performances, the writing, I would say it's a better film. It's better in most elements.
It's a better adaptation of the book.
Yes, it's more different. It's quite different to the book. Yeah, which is nice. Awesome. Anna, where can people find you out there if they want to come find you on social media and that kind of thing?
So I am on Instagram and Twitter at LittleWolf85, and I also write reviews for Film Stories. So that's a physical magazine. Buy more magazines.
Support film magazines. Yeah. Exactly. Go and order Film Stories. It's a great magazine. Anna, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And there we have it. That's it for this week. Thank you so much to everyone who listened, and thank you so much once again to my brilliant guests, Anna Wilczek and Becky Darke. So, what do you think of these two movies? Are you a fan of Wes Craven's underrated and perhaps underappreciated The Serpent and the Rainbow? And what do you think of Pet Sematary? Do you agree with us that it maybe has a few problems, but also overall works as a fucking terrifying horror movie? Get in touch. I'd love to hear your opinions. Email us. The email address is evolutionofhorror@gmail.com. You can find us on all the main social media platforms, on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. There is also a discussion group in which you can join up and discuss this week's movies, the podcast, anything horror related with fellow listeners. That's called the Evolution of Horror Discussion Group, and that can be found on Facebook. You can find all previous episodes and seasons of this podcast on our website. Just simply go to evolutionofhorror.com. That's where you can access an entire series of episodes on slashers, an entire series on ghosts, on folk horror, and a load of other bonus content, including written pieces in our blog section. Once more, that's evolutionofhorror.com. You can also follow us on Letterboxd and keep up to date with every movie we're going to be covering this series, so you can watch in advance and keep up to date. That's letterboxd.com/evolutionpod. You can find this podcast on all major podcast platforms, including iTunes, Stitcher, Acast, Podbean, and various others. And if you get a chance, please do subscribe, share the love, spread the word, tell your friends and family about us, and if you get a minute, please do leave us a little rating or review, preferably a positive one. It helps the podcast get discovered by new listeners. So, on to next week then. Well, we've got another double zombie bill for you next week. Two movies, one made in the mid-80s, the other in the early 90s. I'm going to be joined by actor extraordinaire and horror nerd Stevie Webb, and we are going to be sitting down to discuss two fantastic horror comedies about magical elixirs that can bring you back from the dead. We are going to be discussing Stuart Gordon's Reanimator from 1984 and Robert Zemeckis' Death Becomes Her from 1992. Cannot wait to get stuck into those two movies next week. So join us then for all of this and more on the Evolution of Horror.